Hello, welcome to another episode of Field of Screams podcast. Today we will be talking about Late Night with the Devil, which is about a talk show host that goes too far on Halloween night and bad things happen. I saw that it was playing at my local theater. I had to check it out after seeing the trailer, and I want to talk about it. So if you haven't seen it yet, go see it. Don't get it spoiled online. But if you have seen it, or if you're curious as to what it's about and you're not going to go check it out, then stay here. So that's your warning. And now we're going to get into spoilers and everything that happens in the film. So the first thing I want to talk about, the beginning opens up like a mockumentary. Like a pretend documentary covering the talk show host life before we see the events of the movie go down, which the events of the movie is just an episode of the talk show called Night Owls. I do like this opening because it covers a lot of information fast. It gets us up to date. We have Jack Delroy. It talked about his little adventures, climbing up the ladder as a talk show host. He kind of made it big, but his numbers are kind of faltering. And he always wanted to catch Carson, and he never could. And his wife, the documentary says that his wife was the one thing that he had in his life that, everyone recognized. He loved her to death. But then she got lung cancer, and there's even a moment in the show where he brings her on to the show, and she said something about walking in and seeing a bunch of naked bodies, and, he seemed kind of taken back by it. But eventually she passes away, and even when she passes away, he's still 1 point short of Carson, so he still can't catch him. In the mockumentary, it talks about him having a questionable background. I think it was called, he was part of a group called The Grove, which as soon as it happened, I was like, oh, well, that sticks out there. But then the movie goes on, talking about his life, talking about the show, and how Jack is just really determined to pass Carson up, and whatever he has to do, he has to do. And this is now Halloween night. This is going to be his biggest episode ever. And even the voice said, like, this episode would be remembered forever, and you are going to watch why. And then the episode takes off. Now, the way that this movie is presented, it is presented like you are watching an episode of a talk show that is set in the 70s. They do a very good job. The way people are dressed, the way people are talking. Jack's little gimmicks with his little sidekick, Gus. And Gus, he's just a little side man on the side. You love the guy to death. You could tell he's 100% innocent. When things go south, towards the end of the film, he goes up to the producer of the show and he's like, this is sorcery. And it made me laugh because he's just such an innocent guy. And you're like, oh, don't make anything bad happen to Gus. Come on. There was even a bit in the beginning where it shows that Jack kept trying to use gimmicks to get people to tune into the show. So he was bringing people onto the show that would fight. Gave me instant Jerry Springer vibes. As soon as this supposed episode started, I did feel right at home as if I was just watching a late night show. Jack sneaking up behind Gus with a sheet over his head, dressed as a ghost, scaring Gus. I don't know, you kind of forget it's supposed to be a scary movie for a second. When they supposedly go to break, they do this little, cutaway screen, which I guess is where the supposed AI images are at, which caused so much controversy for this movie. And I swear the AI images are only in it for about 3 seconds. Now, granted, I know the argument, hey, you let them in a little bit, and they'll start doing it more and more and more. It's a slippery slope. And I get that. I'm not here saying, hey, these AI images are cool. They should be there. I'm not saying that. But, if you are legitimately worried about the AI images, it's only 3 seconds of the movie. It's literally cutaway scenes. And then they do a little found footage guy following around Jack or whoever the cast is, kind of capturing their emotions of what just happened in the movie. Now, on this Halloween night episode, Jack has invited 3 different guests. One of them is Christou, which he can read or he can feel a spirit's presence in the room. Instant crossing over with John Edwards vibes there. Then there is Carmichael, which is the skeptic. I'll just call him the skeptic. Really great character there. He brings a lot of comedy to the film. He makes it interesting. And then there is Lily, who is accompanied by her caretaker, June. Now, Christou is kind of the warm-up activity of this movie. He comes in, he does his little John Edwards routine. Does anyone, the name Peter sound familiar? And he looks around, and he gets heckled by a guy. A guy's like, oh, that name sounds familiar, and he says it. And the guy's like, yeah, that's my ex-wife. And Christou's like, oh, she misses you dearly. And he goes, well, that's weird. She left me last year. And the crowds laugh, and Christou kind of bombs. But eventually he does connect with an audience member. But before he leaves stage, he has this big scene to where he hears this name, and it was something like really specific. It was like Ninny or Nanny, I forget what it was, but you find out later that is what Jack's ex-wife, that was her actual name that wasn't used in public. And it kind of spooks Jack a little bit. Now, while Christou's like going into fits, Jack does call out the skeptic, which I immediately love the skeptic. If you're going to have a movie where paranormal stuff like this happens, it's always nice to kind of get the counter. The skeptic person who doesn't believe it, who tries to argue it, because, that person is out there. There's a little skeptic in all of us, and there should be. You shouldn't believe everything at face value. You get ripped off pretty easily if you don't. But, this guy, he kind of brings the comedic to this movie. And this movie was funnier than what I anticipated. The skeptic wastes no time at all, and he calls Christou a hack, and basically saying he's a fraud, he's taken advantage of people at emotional moments. And eventually he does kind of find out that before the show they were asking people lots of questions about missing loved ones and stuff, so there was a bit of truth to that. But eventually Christou, he gets so, worked up, and he gets, almost, possessed. He, throws up this black goo, and he throws up on the skeptic, too. Again, it wasn't necessarily scary, but it was just kind of like a whoa type moment. And I don't know, I even kind of chuckled. Once they went to break, after he spews everywhere, the producer goes out and he's like, someone clean that up. And he's freaking out. And Jack's like, no, we're rolling with this. And Christou gets on the ambulance, and eventually he dies from just bleeding out of every orifice in his body, I think they said. Starting from this moment, Jack is just hell-bent on making the perfect episode to finally catch Carson. And his production crew, they're getting worried as this is happening. He's saying hey, don't tell Gus. Gus will freak out. And you do know that is true deep down once you kind of know who Gus is on this show. Eventually Jack brings out Lily along with June, and they kind of give the backstory that Lily, she was born in a cult. They burned down the entire house, and Lily was the only one who survived, and she deals with basically being possessed. The skeptic's oh, multi-personality disorder, this girl's clearly unwell. And he is just challenging everything along the way. And there's just something entertaining about him. The caretaker, June, who takes care of Lily, she does warn Jack. She goes, listen, Lily's been off the fritz lately. We should just take it really easy with Lily. And Jack's like, oh, come on. We want rough stuff. This is your big break. And then you can tell by the way they're moving, they've been having a little relationship on the side. But when Jack pulls her out, he's talking, they're questioning her. There's even this little dagger that Lily got from the cult itself that they bring onto the set. And basically the subject of, should they let the demon out gets brought up. And Jack's like, oh, should we? Even though June just said they need to take it easy. And June was like, no. She's telling the crowd no, but the entire crowd's like, come on, June, come on. And Jack's like, the people have spoken, June. So she agrees to it. So they chain her to a chair, and they decide to let the demon out on live television. Now, when this girl turns, they did a fantastic job with the makeup. Whatever they did, I was watching her and I was like, is that a guy in a wig acting like that Lily girl? Or is it just really good makeup? And I couldn't tell. Like, I kept trying to look and I couldn't tell. The demon does talk to Jack and says, like, oh, so we meet again, Jack. And Jack kind of gives his, like, oh, I don't think we've ever been acquainted before. And then the demon responds, that's not true, we met along the tall trees. And just kind of gives a line that clearly shakes Jack. And even later on, June's like, what does she mean by that? And Jack's like, oh, I don't know. Now, this whole scene just goes, like, way out there. I mean, eventually the girl's levitating in a chair, and the caretaker's like screaming this chant to get her to stop. And during this entire scene, like, I just see the skeptic in the background, and you just see him raising an eyebrow, which was cracking me up during the whole thing. I was like, this guy, like, what is he gonna say? And he does try to disprove it. Because again, he brings such a comedic aspect to just how he challenges everything. I mean, first he challenges the well-being of the girl, saying that June's taking advantage of her. And, they get all mad. And even Jack's like, dude, like, just admit you're wrong. You will never admit that you're wrong. And he's like, oh, that was great theatrics you showed there, Jack. And, like, accusing him of helping her out. And he's like, of course you would help her out. It would improve your ratings. Like, that's why you would do that. And he's just so matter of fact. But the skeptic does have a little trick, though. He gets Gus, and he tells him to sit in a chair, and he says, I'm going to hypnotize you. And what comes next? Like, we see what Jack sees. Like, Jack's watching, and the skeptic hypnotizes everyone. But what we see is basically Gus pulling open his stomach where worms are falling out. His whole body's just like exploding with worms and nasty stuff popping out. And then we snap back to reality because the skeptic hypnotized everyone. And Jack like freaks out. He goes, did no one else see the worms? And only a few people saw it. So Jack's like, oh my god, I was hypnotized. And the way they were able to disprove it, they went back with the tape. And then you kind of see Gus like freaking out over nothing, thinking worms are coming out of him, but they are not. And and people in the crowd are laughing, which, by the way, if I'm in this crowd and all this stuff is going down, I am leaving. I mean, you start having a girl turning into a demon, no thank you. Like, I probably would have left when Chris Stew started throwing up everywhere. Like, I probably would have had enough by that point. So then the demon girl's like, well, if we can see what really happens when you rewind the tape, why don't we go back to whenever the demon came out and see if that's still there? So they do that. And of course they see Jack's ex-wife in the footage. Ugh, creepy. Now the ending of this movie is controversial, I think, to some people. Because like this movie plays it so straight all the way through up until this point. And then the possessed girl, she goes like Super Saiyan kind of. Her head splits open. Electricity goes everywhere. People start scrambling. She kills everyone on the set except Jack. And Jack kind of like escapes through the back. But then it just gets really trippy and all these scary images. And it was pretty uncomfortable. I thought it was pretty scary. Like you're in the mind of Jack as he's losing his mind. And the very last thing is like he sees his wife in the hospital bed. She asks him to stab her with the dagger, put her out of her misery. He does. He snaps back to reality. Everyone's still dead, but he actually stabbed the girl who was possessed. And you hear the cop sirens coming, and he's just standing there saying, wake up, or something like that. And the movie ends. Now I know this will go, either way for some people. I read online There were some people that did not like the trippy sequences whatsoever. They said it should have stuck with the found footage aspect. The way the TV was rolling. They said it abandoned the way the movie was presenting itself. I understand that criticism, but I think in order for this movie to tell its actual story, it had to. And I think it was a pretty effective way. It gave us a little twist, a twist you can see coming, but I mean, like, it still hurts whenever this is going down. Like, you're like, oh man. Because, I mean, let me try to explain this ending here. So this was my interpretation of the ending, or at least that I got from it. It's probably incomplete. I'm probably missing a few things. If I am, feel free to comment, tell me what you think. But what I got from it is the very beginning. It says that he came from a very suspect cult with very suspect practices. He becomes a late night host. He's doing his thing. He can't catch Carson. He wants to catch Carson. So when he does, and all this trippy stuff going on at the end, he is surrounded at one point by cult members, and they are telling him he needs to pay a price. I think that price that he pays is when his wife dies of lung cancer. It's because he made this pact with the cult, and that is the price he paid. Now, in that scene, it's talking about him paying the price, and I believe one guy interjects and says, no, he still has a lot to pay coming soon. And, you don't really know what that means there at the ending, but I think it just requires a little bit of thinking. But I think what that guy was referencing was this episode. Like, he is going to get what he is asking. He's making a deal with the devil. And when he does, like, this cult also had a hand in with this girl. And the demon that possessed the girl found its way onto the show because he was so hell-bent on catching Carson. The demon finally catches up with him on the very show, on the very episode that catches Carson, and it ruins his show. So when he finally catches them, it kills everyone. What does it cost? It cost him everything. His wife, his crew, Gus, poor Gus. But yeah, I think overall that's the ending. And I think a lot of people that don't like it, they don't really understand like what the movie's trying to get at. And I'm not trying to be pretentious here. Maybe they do get it and they still don't like it. And if you do, that's fine. But after I watched it, I was like, man, that was just kind of a clever way to put that little spin on how Jack ruined everything by making a deal with the devil. Late night with the devil. I mean, it's right in the title. So I liked it. I thought it was a fitting conclusion. Could some of the special effects be a little better? Yeah. But I mean, this is an indie movie. I think they were clearly short on budget at some point. I mean, that's the only reason I can think of that they used the AI images, which were so controversial. Now, hopefully the outcry of those 3 images kind of convinces some labels to stay away from the AI, hopefully. But back to the movie. What I thought of this movie, I thought it was very unique. The idea was so awesome. I really liked it. It's a clever little movie. And I mean, the acting's well. And I was interested the entire time, and I liked how it wrapped up. Some people didn't, but that's okay. Well, this is my review for Late Night with the Devil. If you're still listening, thank you very much for listening to my podcast. If you could like this episode, that gets it out to other people, and it helps out the channel a ton. And also, if you want to catch the other episodes, I'm in the middle of covering all of the Halloween movies, and if you want to know when those come out, feel free to subscribe. Again, thank you for listening, and until next time.